If editing is taking you way too long and somehow still not feeling done, you're not the only one. A lot of photographers confuse slow editing with better editing. But working faster doesn't mean cutting corners. It means getting clear, consistent, and intentional with your process. Today, I'm sharing the strategies that helped me speed up my editing without sacrificing quality or creativity. Whether you're editing 10 images or 200, there's a smarter way to work, and it starts here. When you're early in your photography journey, editing can feel like this enormous mountain you have to climb after every session. You sit down at your computer, open up Lightroom, and the minutes start ticking away. Until suddenly it's 3 hours later, and you've only made it through half your gallery. You've adjusted the exposure on every single image, second-guessed your color choices, and maybe even started over once or twice. And if you're anything like I was in the beginning, you're probably wondering, why does this take me so long? And will it ever get easier? The answer is yes, it absolutely can get easier and faster. But here's the part a lot of people miss. Speeding up your editing isn't just about going faster, it's about creating a system that lets you work more efficiently without sacrificing the quality or creativity that makes your work yours. Let's start with the mindset, because that's where most people get tripped up. There's this belief that fast editing means lazy editing, that if you're not spending hours on each image, you must be cutting corners. But the truth is, time doesn't equal value. Spending 3 hours on one gallery doesn't automatically mean you're producing better work than someone who finishes in one. The real question is whether your editing process is thoughtful, consistent, and aligned with your style. If it is, then fast editing isn't something to feel guilty about. It's something to be proud of. You're not rushing. You're being intentional. That intentionality starts way before you even sit down to edit. It begins with how you shoot. I can't emphasize this enough. Editing is so much easier when you shoot with editing in mind. That means paying attention to light, exposure, and white balance during the session. It means taking a few extra seconds to reframe a shot instead of thinking, I'll fix it later in post. Every time you get it right in camera, you save yourself time in Lightroom. If you shoot underexposed or in mixed lighting, it doesn't mean the image is ruined, but it does mean you'll have more work to do later. So part of speeding up your editing process is actually about slowing down while shooting. Being thoughtful upfront pays off on the back end. Once the session is shot and imported, your editing workflow officially begins. And this is where most people lose time without realizing it. The first big time waster: culling without a plan. If you're opening Lightroom and scrolling through hundreds of images without any sort of system, your brain is going to get fatigued quickly. That leads to overthinking, indecision, and ultimately slower editing. Instead, give yourself a structure. I like to do a first pass where I quickly flag anything that stands out. I'm not editing, just reacting. Then I go back and give a star rating to the strongest images from that flagged group. This helps me narrow down what actually gets edited and delivered. The goal here isn't to eliminate creativity, it's to eliminate decision fatigue. Another time trap: editing one photo at a time from start to finish. I used to do this. I'd pick my favorite image, pour all my energy into making it perfect, and then try to replicate that across the rest of the gallery. But that's not only inefficient, it's also exhausting. Instead, start by editing 1 or 2 anchor images. These are usually the most representative shots from the session. Good lighting, strong expressions, typical skin tones. Once you've edited those, you can copy those settings and apply them to the rest of the gallery, making small adjustments as needed. This technique doesn't just save time, it also helps your gallery stay consistent because everything flows from the same visual foundation. And that brings us to one of the most powerful tools in Lightroom: batch editing. If you're not using it yet, this is going to be a game changer. Batch editing isn't about applying one preset to everything and hoping it sticks. It's about grouping images that were shot in similar light and settings, then syncing your edits across that group. So let's say you have 30 images from the same spot in the park using the same lens and exposure. You edit the first one, then use the sync button to apply those changes to the next 29. You just saved yourself from repeating the exact same edits 29 times. That's not lazy, that's smart. You're honoring your time and your energy while still delivering work that feels intentional. A lot of people ask me, but won't batch editing make my work feel less personal? And I get that fear. It's easy to think that applying the same edit to multiple images somehow strips them of uniqueness. But the truth is, most clients don't want 100 dramatically different edits. They want a cohesive gallery that feels like one story. And batch editing helps you do that faster. You're not removing your artistic touch. You're making space for it to be applied more consistently. Now let's talk about presets, because they often come up in the same conversation about editing speed. Presets can absolutely help you move faster, but only if you're using them intentionally. Slapping a trendy preset on an image without understanding what it does is going to create more problems than it solves. But if you create or customize presets based on your style, dialing in the exposure, contrast, tone curve, and color balance that matches your vision, you can use them as a launch point for every session. I recommend creating a few baseline presets for different lighting scenarios. One for golden hour, one for indoor natural light, maybe one for flash if you use it. These don't need to be fancy. They just need to reflect how you like your images to look. Then, when you sit down to edit, you're not starting from scratch. You're starting with a version of you already built in. But presets aren't just about styling. They can also help with consistency. One of the biggest time wasters I see is photographers second-guessing every single image. Should this one be warmer? Should I add more contrast here? Should I brighten this one more than the last? When you have a preset that you trust, it removes a lot of that uncertainty. You apply it, fine-tune the exposure or white balance as needed, and move on. You're not debating with yourself on every photo. You're following a system. That system should also include a consistent editing order. This might sound small, but the order in which you edit matters more than you think. If you're bouncing around from one panel to another, turning sliders on and off, adjusting contrast before exposure, then going back and redoing everything, you're creating more work for yourself. Pick an editing flow and stick to it. Mine usually starts with exposure, then white balance, followed by contrast, highlights and shadows, blacks and whites, and finally color and sharpening. I don't jump around because I know the order helps me build the image step by step. It also keeps me from over-editing because I'm working intentionally instead of reacting to every small thing I see. And let's not forget about editing environment. If your monitor isn't calibrated or you're working in a room with strange lighting, you're going to second-guess your colors constantly. That slows you down, leads to inconsistent galleries, and makes you doubt your choices. You don't need an expensive setup, but try to edit in consistent lighting. Avoid harsh overhead lights or big shifts between day and night. And if you can, use a color-calibrated monitor or at least one you trust. Your editing space should support your workflow, not work against it. You also want to remove as many distractions as possible. That might sound basic, but if you're checking your phone every few minutes, hopping into email, or getting pulled into notifications, your editing time will stretch out way longer than it needs to. Try editing in focused blocks. Set a timer for 45 minutes, put your phone on silent, and just work. You'll be amazed at how much more efficient you become when you give your brain space to stay in the creative zone. Another speed-boosting habit? Keyword shortcuts. Lightroom has a ton of them, and learning even a few can shave minutes off your workflow every day. Things like using D to jump into develop mode, G to return to grid view, R to crop, or using brackets to adjust brush size on the fly. These might seem small at first, but once they're muscle memory, they allow you to move through your edits without stopping to click through menus. The goal isn't to edit like a robot, it's to remove friction so you can stay in flow. And finally, let's talk about trusting your edits, because one of the biggest reasons photographers spend too long editing is because they don't trust what they've done. They keep tweaking, keep comparing, keep going back and redoing work they already finished. That comes from fear. Fear that the client won't like it, fear that it's not good enough, fear that someone will criticize the color grading or contrast or crop. But here's the thing. If you've done the work, followed your process, and stayed true to your style, it is good enough. And if your client booked you based on your portfolio, then they already like the kind of edits you do. You don't need to reinvent your style every session. You just need to show up consistently and trust that your work stands on its own. Once you've got a foundation of fast editing habits in place, like using presets, syncing similar images, and editing in a consistent order, you can start building systems that make the whole process feel less like a grind and more like a rhythm. Systems are what transform you from someone who's always scrambling behind the scenes to someone who can stay creative, even when you're on a deadline. And they don't have to be complicated. A system is really just a set of repeatable steps you don't have to rethink every time. When you know what happens after every shoot, how you import, how you cull, how you edit, and how you deliver, it frees up your brain to focus on creativity instead of logistics. One of the most impactful systems you can create is a post-session editing checklist. It might seem unnecessary, but even the most seasoned photographers benefit from one. Why? Because it removes mental clutter. You're not sitting there trying to remember what comes next. You're just following the process. Mine includes steps like backing up raw files to 2 locations, importing into Lightroom using a consistent file naming convention, applying my base preset at import, culling in 2 passes, editing anchor images first, syncing edits across batches, refining individual frames, cropping consistently, exporting in both high-res and web-res versions, and finally, uploading to the gallery platform. It sounds like a lot, but once it's built, it runs like muscle memory. You don't waste time wondering what you forgot. You just do the work. You can also automate some of these steps to speed things up even more. Lightroom allows you to create import presets that apply a specific develop preset, metadata, keywords, and even file destination the moment your images come into the program. If you always shoot the same genres, like newborns, weddings, or branding sessions, set up an import preset for each one. That way, you're not redoing the same setup every single time. The more of these tiny repetitive tasks you can automate, the more creative energy you preserve for the part that matters most, your artistic interpretation of the images. Another time saver is using smart previews. These are smaller versions of your original RAW files that let you edit faster, especially on slower computers or laptops. The great thing is that all your edits will still apply to the full RAW files when you export, but you won't have to deal with long load times while you're in the Develop module. If you've ever felt your computer lag when switching between images, this one change alone could give you back hours over the course of a month. And speaking of lag, sometimes the bottleneck in your editing process isn't Lightroom. It's your own internal pressure to make everything perfect. Perfectionism is the silent killer of editing speed. You start nitpicking every highlight, obsessing over skin tone in images that already look fine, tweaking white balance back and forth until you're dizzy. And the irony is, most of your clients won't notice those tiny differences you're agonizing over. They won't see that you warmed an image by 2 points or adjusted the clarity by 3. What they will notice is the emotion in the photo, the connection, the story. They'll remember how the photo made them feel, not whether the shadows were lifted by exactly the right amount. So if you find yourself editing and re-editing the same image over and over again, pause and ask, is this really about improving the photo, or am I just stuck in a loop of doubt? One way to break that perfectionism loop is to set editing limits for yourself. For example, give yourself a time cap per session or even per image. That might sound restrictive at first, but it actually encourages clarity. You start to recognize what's essential and what's just over-processing. When I started setting 90-minute limits on gallery edits, I realized how much of my extra time was just second-guessing. With a limit, I stayed focused. I trusted my presets, leaned on my system, and moved with purpose. And the quality didn't suffer. In fact, my galleries got more consistent. That brings up another point, knowing when to stop editing. This is one of the most underrated editing skills there is. A lot of photographers think that if they just tweak one more slider, they'll find some hidden magic in the image. But most of the time, you reach a point where additional edits aren't making the photo better, they're just making it different. And different isn't always better. There's a moment in every edit where the image feels complete. It feels balanced. It communicates what you want it to say. When you reach that point, stop. Trust that you've done enough. Knowing when to stop is a skill that takes time to develop, but once you have it, your editing time drops dramatically because you're no longer chasing something that doesn't need to be chased. Now, let's talk about burnout, because that's the shadow side of all this. Speeding up your editing process shouldn't come at the expense of your energy or joy. If you're pushing yourself to get through galleries faster and faster, but you're feeling drained and disconnected from your work, that's not efficiency. That's exhaustion. The goal isn't to become a machine. The goal is to work smarter so you can stay creative, stay present, and enjoy the process. If you start to dread editing, that's your sign to reassess. Look at where your energy is leaking. Are you overbooking yourself? Are you undercharging and trying to compensate with volume? Are you working in a cluttered or distracting environment that's adding friction to every session? Sometimes the best way to speed up your editing isn't to edit faster. It's to create a business model that supports a sustainable pace. One thing that's helped me avoid burnout is batching my editing sessions. That means grouping similar tasks together instead of bouncing between types of work all day long. For example, I'll dedicate one morning to culling all of my current sessions. Then the next day, I'll edit anchor images for each one. The day after that, I'll do batch edits and fine-tuning. This way, I'm not switching mental gears constantly. I stay in one headspace, which keeps me more focused and less fatigued. You can do the same thing with client delivery, album design, or social media planning. The less you context switch, the more brain power you preserve. Another helpful practice? Take breaks. Real ones. Step away from the screen. Stretch. Go outside. Refill your coffee. Editing is not an endurance sport, and trying to power through 6 hours of Lightroom in one sitting will just fry your creative circuits. Your brain works better in sprints than marathons. Give it a chance to breathe. Often, a 5-minute break will help you see an image differently or realize that something you were over-editing actually looked fine all along. As your workflow improves, you'll also start to see how fast editing allows you to serve your clients better. Delivering galleries sooner, with consistent quality, makes a huge impression. It shows professionalism, it builds trust, and it allows you to stay top of mind while the emotion of the session is still fresh. Clients are more likely to share their images, leave glowing reviews, and rebook when they feel taken care of quickly and beautifully. That's a win for them, and a win for you. All of these strategies come down to one simple idea. Fast editing doesn't mean careless editing. It means you've taken the time to build a process that lets you move with clarity and purpose. You've practiced, you've refined your system, you've made space for creativity by reducing clutter. That's not cutting corners. That's honoring your time and your craft. And if you're not there yet, if you're still in the place where editing takes you 5 hours and you're not sure what to automate or what to change, that's okay. You're not behind. You're learning. You're building the muscles that will carry you through the next season of your business. Every gallery you edit teaches you something. Every workflow you tweak brings you closer to the process that works for you. And eventually, you'll look back and realize you've built something efficient, flexible, and deeply aligned with your style. You don't need to be the fastest editor on the planet. You just need to have a system that supports the kind of work you want to create and the kind of life you want to live outside of your computer. So take what works, let go of what doesn't, and keep building, one photo, one gallery, one streamlined step at a time. If editing is taking you way too long and somehow still not feeling done, you're not the only one. A lot of photographers confuse slow editing with better editing. But working faster doesn't mean cutting corners. It means getting clear, consistent, and intentional with your process. Today, I'm sharing the strategies that helped me speed up my editing without sacrificing quality or creativity. Whether you're editing 10 images or 200, there's a smarter way to work, and it starts here.